Hello, everyone. Welcome again. My name is Eric Johnson. I am a Lighthouse International Film Festival board member and a past executive director and programming director of the festival. I'd like to welcome you to a very special live from LBI event. I am obviously not live from LBI, but I will be kicking it directly to Amir Bogen, the festival's executive director, immediately after this. We're pleased to welcome you to the special event where the festival is presenting Scott Rosenfelt, an acclaimed producer with an award for an outstanding career in filmmaking. So I'm going to get us started basically right away. Thank you all for joining us. We have one more virtual event, Filmmaker Talk, immediately after this. We'll put up the virtual event schedule. And then we're going to be kicking off more film screenings, more drive-in screenings tonight, live on LBI. So without further ado, I'm going to kick it down to Amir Bogen, and he is with Scott Rosenfelt. So let me get them up here on screen. Hang on one sec. Find the user. Let's see where we're at. Okay. Amir, if you can, I see your name, but I think I'm looking for Amanda, so I don't see that she's live. Turn to Amir. Amir says, okay, will do. I am adding you right now. Here we go. Let's check this out. Should be good to go. We've had an amazing first couple of days here, and here we are. Amir,
this is Scott Rosenfelt.
Hey, Scott, how are you? Okay, let me, Amir, I'm just going to kick it to you guys, so take over.
Okay.
Sorry, toggled the wrong video.
Yeah, just a second. I'm going to.
There we go.
Okay. Good. Okay, so everybody, I'm really so excited and happy to have, you can say, a legend.
Well, I'm still alive, I guess it's true.
Well, there's a lot of legends are still alive and can actually. We can test. They can testify and talk about their career, and we can also try and talk about their career. So Scott is our Lighthouse Award winner for an outstanding career in filmmaking. And when we are going to talk about his career and the amazing names of film that he was involved with over the years, and actors, producers, filmmakers that he actually helped since like the start of their careers, and helped make them what they are now. And he's the one that doing all the things behind the scenes and and making everything work, which is a complicated mission, and he's the master in that, because we'll talk about his film. It's like the work and yeah, the results are obvious to everyone. So Scott, I want to start talking to you about the early days. How did you start? How did you went to filmmaking?
Sure.
Why did you became a producer rather than director?
Right. Well, when I was younger, when I was in high school, I did want to be a writer. I also, I had a minor league tryout in baseball too, but I really enjoyed writing. I wanted to be a writer and a novelist, and I wrote a lot of stories for the newspaper, high school newspaper and the like. And, that's not necessarily a professional endeavor, but it caught the attention of the local newspaper. I won some awards, and then I went to college my freshman year for journalism. And I was working for the Boston University newspaper, which actually had the second largest circulation in Boston behind the Globe. So it had a big reach because there were a lot of students. And I was a freshman, and I was writing movie reviews and some other. I really felt like I had something there with writing. And in my second semester at BU, I started writing short stories and wrote a short screenplay, and it just kind of got everything going inside me. And I always loved movies. I didn't grow up in a movie environment. I grew up in a town in Pennsylvania, and I didn't walk around with a 8mm camera, which of course dates me, but that's what it was. I didn't do any of that stuff. I just, enjoyed going to the movies, and this caught me. This caught me. So I transferred to NYU, and in the mid, to late 70s, and graduated and fell in love with living in New York, and going to school at NYU was amazing. It just, that was it. I knew that's what I wanted to do, and worked on a couple films as a production assistant, including Saturday Night Fever, right before I moved to LA. It was the summer of 1977. It was the same summer of the blackout, or the brownout, I guess they call it, but the big one. I actually left New York driving a van to Los Angeles the morning of the blackout, kind of an auspicious day. I think it was like July 13th, 1977. And once I got to LA, there was there was sort of this odd, strange independent, non-independent film business. There was John Cassavetes and pretty much nobody else. I loved his work. I mean, I became a fan of his work while in film school. It was just some of the great stuff, Husbands, and Ultimate Woman Under the Influence, and so that either that or there were drive-in movies. Companies like Crown International and New World and all these other companies, Roger Corman's company and Crown and some others that made films for drive-ins. And so I started working. I did a little PAing work, and then I got an opportunity to be a production manager on a movie for Crown International. And I was very young. It was a movie called Galaxina with Dorothy Stratton, and went through that whole experience with Dorothy and her husband, and the unfortunate thing that happened when we finished shooting between them and him killing her, and all. It was terrible, but it was a kind of a wake-up call to Hollywood. Even when you're 23 and 24, you're trying to process. You open up the newspaper and see somebody dead, and then the husband shot himself, and it was. We saw signs on the set. These are the times like later on with Harvey Weinstein and other situations where people know stuff, but they kind of either they keep quiet or they don't know what to do. And it was the same thing here. We saw stuff with Dorothy and Paul. They didn't know what to do. We were kids making a movie, and then this happened. It was like, yes, it was leading to that, but we didn't know it. And, unfortunately she didn't either. But this led me into, staying in low budget filmmaking. And I ended up making a film with Willem Dafoe, Judge Reinhold, called Roadhouse 66, which was okay. It wasn't a great film, but it introduced me to a couple really good actors. That led me to working with the company that brought Teen Wolf to me and said, we'd like you to produce it. You did a good job on Roadhouse 66. It wasn't a particularly, big film, but you did well. You brought it in on time and all that. So why don't you take a look at this movie? And I came into it with my partner, and that sort of sent, that movie making a lot of money was very rare, because it was in the sense that people were making, people who were making independent films at that point were making art house films, but they weren't making commercial films that were studio films, but less money. And I was like, this is pretty interesting. You could do this. You could make, a low budget movie, but you can make a commercial studio picture just for a lot less money. Wow, this is interesting. But so I kept, I felt like that was something that I could do. And then that led to more of the same, and it led ultimately to Mystic Pizza, which was really a great experience working with that script, and Alfred Urey, who came in to rewrite it, and and all the young director Donald Petrie, whose father was Dan Petrie, and Donald had been doing television, and of course essentially finding Julia Roberts, who just walked in one day and read for the part from our casting director. So all of these things sort of were building blocks to making these kinds of interesting commercial films, but independent films. And after Mystic Pizza and you know, there were a couple other small films and one film, Big Man on Campus, that I did for Vestron, which was a fun film to make, but didn't do that well, but it was an interesting film to make. A lot of hands on it, too many hands on the movie. And I finally kind of said, you know, I don't know, I think I've got to make the jump, And I don't know how yet. I had an agent and I said, look, I'm not gonna do any more of these indie movies. You know, I want to do a studio picture somehow. And you know, and he called, he talked to people, and it took a little while. It took almost 9 months. But after a lot of stirring the pot, you know, I went in to interview to produce a movie for John Hughes called Career Opportunities. I went in, read the script, knew the director, Brian Gordon, and liked the director. He was a new director, but he had made a really good short. And the script was okay. It was kind of like, you know, in the pantheon of John Hughes movies, wouldn't say it's his best. And it was just quick. It was a quick thing, you know, in a Kmart, right? And I read it and I thought, okay, you know. So I went in to interview and I was there with my partner, with John. And, you know, John sat down. He was a legend, and he really was a legend, and brilliant. You know, a little odd, but brilliant, and treated me well. And you know, he looked at both of us, and my partner kept saying to me, "I know you don't love the script, but it's John Hughes. Be careful, right?" And John looks at us and immediately goes, "So, what do you think of the script?" Because he was really a pure writer. He wasn't really a producer. And he was a good director. I don't know that he really liked directing, only because he had to actually talk to people. But he was a great writer, and that's what he loved. He loved writing late at night, and he was so good at it. And so, you know, my partner's kicking me under the table because he goes, "What do you think of the script?" And I looked at John, and he looked at me, and I thought, well, you know, these are moments that make or break you. And I said, it's okay. He goes, "No, come on, what do you really think?" And I said, "Yeah, it's all right." You know, he said, "You're right. It needs a lot of work," and blah, blah, blah. And we talked about that. And he said, "Brian's working on it already, and you guys could jump in." We left the interview, and I was glad I did that. My partner was still a little nervous about it. And about 2 days later, his lawyer called and said, "John really liked meeting you, but he's going to hire somebody else to do Career Opportunities." So my partner said, "See, I told you, you know, you should have never said that. And yeah, we lost the job because you told John Hughes his script stunk, right?" And I said, "Well, I didn't really say it stunk, but, you know, I was being honest without being hurtful, you know." So about 4 weeks go by, then I'm starting to think, you know what, I must have screwed up. This is terrible. I should have never done that. Depressed. And literally one day I came home from having a meeting with somebody, and against the door of my condo was a script, an envelope which appeared to be with a script in it. And I got closer to it, and it had the Warner Brothers label on it. I had never gotten anything from the studio. I'd only ever produced independent films, and they don't messenger you anything. They don't pick you up and take you anywhere, you know. And the script was there. I opened it up, and inside was a letter from somebody at Warner Brothers that said, "John wanted you to take a look at the script, read it, and then call and come in and we'll meet." So I started reading the script, and even though Chris Columbus did some really good work on it later, it was, I mean, the comparison between that and the Career Opportunities, no offense, I used to say, like, the scales of justice. Like, it was like, and I after 20 pages, I was like rolling on the floor, not just laughing at it, but like, oh my God, what a difference, right? So went in for the interview, and it wasn't really an interview. It was kind of just to make sure the people at Warner Brothers wanted to make sure we were, you know, because they were worried. We were like, oh, we were guys who made independent films. And they know how to make a studio film. Are they too young? You know, they're kids. You know, we were in our 30s. We're kids, you know, according to the Warner Brothers executives. And that all worked out fine. The next thing I know, a car is picking me up, taking me to Chicago and to meet John and the director. And they kept saying, well, John wants you to meet the director. And I said, who's the director? And they were like, John will tell you. And I tried to get somebody to tell me who the director was, and nobody would tell me. So I'm picked up in a limo, taken to LAX, first class flight, all these things that are brand new to me. Get to Chicago, limo to the hotel, which was the Four Seasons. Get into the Four Seasons. John calls from his car. John, one of 3 people in the United States that has a cell phone, the kind that were attached to your car. Hey, we're picking you up. We'll meet us in the lobby in about 30 minutes. John, who you? Click. He didn't say anything. So I walk down the lobby with my partner, and standing there is Chris Columbus, who I knew because Chris went to NYU. He went after me, but we knew through all these NYU circles in LA. We'd seen each other often. We had mutual friends. And I'm like, Chris, Scott. John's like, you guys know each other. I'm thinking, these people at the studios are crazy. They do the dumbest stuff. Like they didn't want us to know who. I don't even understand it. So it was fine. We ended up going on to do the movie. There's a lot of history about what happened when
We're talking about Home Alone, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll talk about it later, a little bit later, but there's some other film that I want to discuss with you. So first of all, like when you look at your filmography, so you have those 3 films that you mentioned, or like 2 that you mentioned, and one of my favorites, which is Teen Wolf. 85, right?
Yeah.
So it's long time ago, but it's a great movie. I just watched it this week, and you have Mrs. Pizza,
Right.
88, right?
88.
And Home Alone, which is 1990.
You cannot forget Smoke Signals.
Yeah,
Because Smoke Signals to me is
but that's later in the 90s, right?
Yeah.
So,
But
no, we're gonna go.
Right.
Don't worry, I got that in as well. But I'm
in
talking,
critical thinking.
and this is
But
not.
anyway, yeah.
But like, you have the perspective, like looking back to the 80s, when we have all these classic films where some are indie, some are like they're indie, but they have like a Hollywood era or aura or something like that.
Yeah.
And we carry them till today. So maybe tell us about how it was making movies back in that decade.
Well, yeah, because what I saw was also there was this new group of films like the one Platoon. Oliver Stone was doing it. Platoon was $5 million. Nobody had done that. It's like what we were doing, but he was doing it, and he was a great writer. And Room with a View. There was a group of movies that was doing exactly what I was talking about too. Well, it wasn't to say I was the only person doing this, and these people, there are other people trying to create a new world coming out of the late 70s and Mean Streets and all those other great films and Apocalypse and Midnight Cowboy and all that world, Hal Ashby films that were, that great late 70s turn of 80 had to turn into something. And it did, it turned into a new form of independent film. John, all the Cassavetes, was still making movies, but now he was like the grandfather of all of it, which was amazing because he was one of the first, really one of the first. And certainly just about the only one in LA, but it felt like there was also the ability to get movies made. There were 40 companies, including studios and major, whatever, you didn't even call them independent companies. All these companies that finance movies. You would pitch something, or they would hire you. For me as a producer, sometimes I'm just hired and I execute somebody else. Sometimes I develop something and they would hire people want to do that movie. There were so many places to go. The year for instance, even into the 90s, the year we sold Smoke Signals to Miramax, they bought 52 movies, and 3 years later they were buying 12. Everything changed, right? So, but back in the 80s, there was just more. So you could go all over the place. We never raised money. We never had to do what I've had to do for the last 15, 20 years, which is go find regular people to give you money. Part of that joke there is like when people started saying to me, where's your business plan? I was like, what's a business plan? I don't know. I'm not even go to business school. I'm a filmmaker. But because back then you had all your meetings, so there was enough companies designed to allow you somebody. I mean, you didn't get everything made, but we had good shots at getting a lot of things made, and it was just easier isn't the right word. I don't know that it was easier per se. I think if you were, maybe it's because I knew what to do, but there were roadways that were very specific. It wasn't just Netflix, and Amazon and Hulu, and then nobody would be, because the studios are making Black Panther, right, and bigger movies. It was all over, and then even the foreign entities started financing films back in the 80s. There was a big thing. Larry Gordon's company, Largo, one of the early companies that was making U.S. movies, but based on foreign money, all the sales, pre-sales, and everything. And I don't mean the junk. I don't mean the Canon films and all that, the junky stuff. I mean like real stuff, right. And films like, even the big ones like Predator and those kinds of things a lot of that was made on foreign money. So there was a lot going on. You had more opportunity in the 80s. There was definitely more opportunity. People started to scramble, when the 90s hit, and that's one of the reasons I felt like I've got to do a studio movie, because I think this is going to change and end or something. And it kind of did for a while, the indie thing. And the studios got wise, and they bought up certain indie distributors and wanted to have their own divisions. They wanted to, be the big guys and have it. So they bought up a lot of it. They in a sense destroyed it too. Yeah. They did destroy it in a way, very sad way. And it tried to build itself back up again later in the 90s, but it never. I don't think it ever quite hit like that period in the 80s. I mean, we know. I'm going to call Henry, call Bill, call Steve, go in, and we had 3 meetings a day, every day for weeks to pitch something. We could have 35 pitch meetings. You can't really do that now. It just doesn't happen. Right. So it was, and there was a good fraternity too. I'm sure there's the semblance of a fraternity now, but I think there was more of a fraternity because people were saying, "Wow, we're creating this as we go, and we're building something." And I know all the producers, who luckily most are still alive from that time, and Sarah Pillsbury and Midge Sanford, and others. Like we all used to compare notes. We even had offices together. We didn't fight with each other, and compete. We all had our own thing, and it was about producers. It wasn't just about, God help us, just directors. How festivals and other places get like. I always joke, it's like, oh yes, of course, the director. That he also or she cooked the food, sewed the clothing, drove the car to the set, and directed the movie. Right? They did everything. Right? It's producers do a lot, as you realize when you're actually making movies. It's not so apparent to the outside world, but it's certainly apparent to people who work on movies.
Okay, let's go back to Teen Wolf, because we also have a special guest that want to talk to you. So Teen Wolf, again, 1985, with Michael J. Fox and our buddy Jerry Levine,
right?
Who we are blessed to have in our camp, and on our team. So yeah, Jerry, are you here? Yeah, so in the meantime, let's talk about Teen Wolf in general. Tell us the story of...
Well, the company that made Teen Wolf had bought the script from 2 writers, and they had made Valley Girl, this company. And I noticed this company, and it's the same company I made Roadhouse 66 with. Because this company made Valley Girl, and I said to my partner, these people know what they're doing. These people made Valley Girl, and it's exactly what I'm talking about. It's no longer an exploitation film. It's a commercial film, but has an indie spirit. They're doing something. Let's find these people, and let's figure it out, because I think they're doing what we want to do. which is to make, more commercial movies, but for a price. And they were. So after doing Roadhouse, they gave us the script to look at, and it was a good script. We had to work on it, as every script you have to work on. We brought in, the writers, continued to work on it. One of the writers, who, the writers were Jeff Loeb and Matt Wiseman, and Jeff has had a different career with, not Marvel, one of the big, yeah, he in the print side, not in the movie, but very successful. But he's a budding screenwriter, and Jeff was one of these guys that every time you gave him a script note, he would look at you and go, "You're going to destroy the movie," and then you talk it out, and you go, "Okay, all right, yeah, that's fine." And then you give another note, and you go, "You're going to destroy the movie." He just had this. He couldn't help himself. He just had to let everybody know he knew better. But we worked through everything, and they wrote a very funny script.
So yeah, this is Jerry.
Yes.
This is Scott. You know each other.
Okay.
And this is baby.
Hear me?
I know that Jerry has his own version of life as styles, even at this age, but at the time it was really interesting because we had Michael J. Fox, obviously, and we wanted the sidekick, right? The sidekick, and the best example at the time had been Curtis Armstrong, who was in Risky Business, right? And that was like the sidekick, goofy, sort of really charactery, and an odd-looking kind of guy, and all that. So we started talking about actors, and then our casting director, Paul Ventura was his name, who said, there's this guy. You really got to see him. You got to see this. And what's he said Jerry Levine, and of course I'm Jewish, so I'm not anti-Semitic. But we did not expect, there's just this expectation of we didn't think Styles would be Jerry, whoever Jerry Levine is. It just, something doesn't quite sound like it. And he did his stuff, and it was amazing. I mean, really funny, and also you could tell underneath it all, which he certainly showed to the world later, his acting ability. But there was something really, really amazing, and that included myself, my partner, Mark Levinson, and the director, Rod Daniel, because the studio as it were, had this feeling that I'm describing, what are you guys are crazy. What? This guy? School or something. He doesn't look like Styles, but we said, we're doing it. This is what we're doing. And it was like getting in that meeting and, Rod taking his shoe off and banging it on the desk and saying, I'll stake the whole movie. He was like, I don't care about Michael J. Fox. I want this guy in the movie. And that's what happened. And they finally said, okay, we'll look at the dailies, and if it's no good, we'll do something else. And that didn't happen. And, as I think Jerry has said to me a couple times, everywhere he goes still at this age, grocery stores and the like, he's still styled. So maybe we should have figured out how not to have you in the movie, but we're certainly glad that we were. We were certainly glad that we were.
And Jerry,
I'm thrilled that it.
What do you remember?
I had never heard that story before. Amir, can you hear me?
Yeah. What do you remember from working with Scott on Teen Wolf?
Well, I smiled. I didn't stop smiling the whole time. But I never heard that story before, Scott, and I always wondered why it took you so long to call me. All my friends were, everybody else in the movie was getting offered the part, and I was like, hey, wait a minute, I auditioned weeks before.
Oh, right.
I never quite heard the end of that story. Mark Arnold was a friend of mine who had gotten cast, and I was like, wait a minute, I think this is a more interesting part, but he got cast, and I didn't know you had to work so hard. Thank you very much, because it changed my life. I appreciate it.
It's always honestly, it's one of my great pleasures to be able to, have done that. To be able to fight for what I always said, and I say it today, is I'm going to fight for the best actor. He may not look what you thought it was or whatever, but I'm going to fight for the best actor, period. And that's what I said back then, and I say it today, you know, and I believe in it. And that's really what it was. And, you know, with you and Matt
Wow,
Abbott.
that's a bit of, wow. That's a bit of, Amir, that's some Teen Wolf folklore right there that even I was not aware of. Thank you for that. It took getting Scott to LBI. Congratulations, Scott. This is wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you. It's
That's
nice.
really great. I told you these guys were terrific.
Yeah, no, I was glad. As it turns out, and coincidentally, I live fairly close, so it was. They didn't have to send me a plane ticket or even a limo. I should have made them send me a limo, but I drove here. So
absolutely, absolutely. Amir, are you going to ask Scott about his new movie?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Of course you are. I'm dying to hear about that myself.
Yeah, but I want to just we'll do it shortly because we do want to get to the new movie. But we have Jerry here. We have, in your career, you had Matt Damon, his first role in Mystic Pizza.
Right.
Julia Roberts that you just mentioned.
Right.
Probably like a bunch of other, like Willem Dafoe, that was one of them.
Yeah, well, when Willem did Roadhouse 66, he had done, actually he had done a film called The Loveless, which was a really interesting, was it Catherine Bigelow's first movie? I think an indie film, and he may have already done Streets of Fire, or he did Streets of Fire right after us. It's right around that time.
But like you said, you're zeroing in on the actor that you won.
Well, yeah.
And basically you see Matt Damon, Jerry Levine, and Julia Roberts are the top of the crops in Hollywood. So tell me about that. Like finding those talents.
I felt like, because I had come to producing from a creative sense, not from a business sense, I always saw myself as a filmmaker. So I was like another director, even though I wasn't the director. I was another writer, even though I wasn't the writer. And so I had a good eye. I studied. I did some acting in college at NYU. I made sure I learned about those pieces of it, not just from reading a book, but from doing it. Whether I did it well or not, it's another story. I did have a small part in Teen Wolf. I played a fry cook, but of course that was a joke role.
Oh, I remember that. I remember that day.
I felt like I had a good eye. I worked with casting directors really closely. I worked with Jane Jenkins and Janet Hershenson a lot for a long time after Teen Wolf. And we had something, and I just felt like I could see it. It's one of the reasons I thought about directing and had directed a little bit, but I just felt like it's something I can see, I can feel it, and that's what we go on. To the ability to look through a whole group of people and say, wow, this person's gonna pop, or this person got me, and find them and put them in something, and ultimately allow somebody else to take the credit for it, which is usually what happens. But that's okay. Even
Amir?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Amir?
Yeah.
Can I just say, as I'm listening to Scott, one of my recollections in terms of Scott as a producer, as he's describing it, is it's so seamless. Although it seems complicated to do, working with Scott was a seamless process. There was always a smile. You always felt like you were in good hands, safe and comfortable. And Scott, it felt very seamless to me. There's no bumpy ground. It just cruised right through.
I always also felt it wasn't my job to draw attention to myself. It was, my job to make everything click. And sometimes I still say it, if a producer's doing his or her job, you could be very quiet and be doing your job. You don't have to be the loudest voice. Directors command the set, you should. And, you're there to support them and bring out the best in them. And, if there's something you want to talk about with a director, you do it in private, and you could even have a serious conversation, and then you agree on something, and then you provide the united front to the cast and crew, because you do not want to be, I don't need to tell people, oh yeah, Scott's idea was better than, it's like, honestly, that doesn't help the movie. And you're there to serve the movie.
I do kind of remember at some point, Amir, looking over and seeing Scott and saying to somebody, who is that guy? What does he do? They said, he's the boss. I said, oh, okay. Pretty seamless, Scott. Pretty effective.
Thank you. Well, and especially at Teen Wolf, Rod took up a lot of space. God bless him.
You've done a great job.
Okay, so let's talk about critical thinking.
Sure.
A film that I saw and really, it made me inspired, made me laugh. Such a sweet movie and kind of small, right? Like, it's not a huge production.
Yeah.
It was supposed to be at South by, premiering at South by. Yeah. We try to get it to Lighthouse, maybe next year or your next work. But yeah, tell us about it.
Well, I knew about this story this is based on a true story about a high school chess team in the late 90s, mid to late 90s, that was the first inner city high school chess team to win the national chess championship. It had always been white upper middle class schools and the like, and all of a sudden this Cuban neighborhood in their Liberty City, and with kids who are Haitian and Cuban and black and everything, this ragtag group was put together by a coach, a teacher, who Mario Martinez, who was Cuban American, who taught them how to play chess and brought them to the national chess championship. Great story. So I started working on this back almost 20 years ago with a partner who ended up producing the movie as well now. And we worked on it, and it was on and off and on and off. And then I had actually developed a similar story that was fictional but different. And then just 2-3 years ago, I started spending time with John Leguizamo. And John and I worked out a couple things we wanted to do together. I had brought him a script that I had written, that I was producing, that he wanted to do, he attached to, and then he said to me, I want to do something, and he mentioned something about wanting to play a coach. And a good producer, I hadn't thought about this chess movie in 7 years. And I was like, the chess coach, right? Boom. And he got into it right away. And that was, he loved it. He wanted to do this movie. It sort of resurrected the whole thing with my partners in Florida, where the movie was made and funded. And then I said to John, I think you should direct the movie. And he was like, I don't know, because John is one of these actors who has a wonderful, wonderful career, and books himself silly. He's sometimes, I'm not sure he knows where he's supposed to be the next day, but he does a lot of work, and he does his shows, he does his stand-up show, and he does a lot of stuff, good stuff, and he travels, and he's all over the place. And I said, you have to direct this movie. You have to direct the movie. So I'm glad I forced him to direct it, because he was starring in it and acted in it, and it started a great relationship. And he was a joy to work with, just immensely talented, both dramatically and comedically. And we had fun. He was great with the crew. I'll tell you, when you have a director like John and Jerry having acted and directing, I mean. Yeah, if John said, take that broken glass, chew it up, and then spit it out, and nobody would have said no. They would have said, sure, John, whatever you say, I'll walk across the glass, because he had a way of handling the actors. He understood the camera too, but he had a way of speaking to them, and they respected him and loved him so much. It was just a great, great experience. And we had, and we had the real guys who are now in their late 30s. Involved with us as consultants, and we picked great young actors to play them. And we used to, on the set, it was funny because the consultants were there all the time, and we'd be sitting having coffee or lunch, and the actor would be sitting with the guy who he was a lot of the time. It was always very funny. John and Mario, the real Mario didn't look as much alike. Mario was like kind of a really big guy. We kept saying to John, you got to diet if you're going to play the real Mario, because he was a big guy, but he didn't want to play. But it was, you know, and it was a really beautiful story. And the community, you know, the Miami community really opened up for it. And Miami Jackson High School, which was where it really happened, was helpful. We didn't actually shoot there, but you know, that usually doesn't happen because it doesn't look the same. Right? But they were all very helpful, and it was really a great experience.
By the way, if John is here, because I know he might be, we really want you to be with us on camera. You're definitely not a camera shy person, as everybody can see on like in your films and TV shows. No. Oh, okay. So.
10 years ago.
It's okay. Yeah.
Sure.
Right. So smoke signals.
Yeah. Well, smoke signals is also one of, you know, in some ways, I will still say I love a lot of the things I've done for different reasons, but purely, I think smoke signals is my love. And, you know, that started because I after Home Alone, I got a little tired of living in LA. I had bought a house in the San Juan Islands, north of Seattle. So I had been going up there for a couple of years as a kind of a second home. And I got this bug about after the riots in LA, about getting out of LA, like 90, 91, right? And so I moved to Seattle, because Seattle was booming, like just exploding at the time, really exploding. And I kind of walked into Seattle when it was really exploding culturally, music, not as much film, but music and you know, political stuff and all kinds of really great stuff. And I wanted, you know, I met somebody who wanted to invest in movies up there. I always joke I had to leave LA to find the right person and the right people to make the kind of movies I really wanted to make. And we talked about things, and then one day I was at a bookstore, a great bookstore called Elliott Bay Books, and I picked up a copy of Sherman Alexie's collection of short stories, The Lone Ranger and Tonto Fist Fight in Heaven. And I read it, and I was like, I know he's Native American, but I think he's Jewish or something. He sounds like my brother, you know. He plays basketball, he talks about basketball. His characters are extraordinary. And I just got so excited about it. I found him. He was living in Spokane. He was married and didn't have any kids yet. And we started a dialogue. And he hadn't moved to Seattle yet, but we just started. He always loved movies. He had never written anything. He came to visit, and I gave him a bunch of scripts to read. And the next thing you know, he was working with Chris Eyre, who was a young NYU graduate, Native American director, to develop the script for the Sundance writing workshop. It was a natural for Sundance, Native American. And they developed the script. I was still sort of on the sidelines, watching with my company, just watching. And they developed it, and there were a couple of people interested in it. And then Sherman was a little frustrated with how it was all going commercially, and he said, you have to come into this. He sent me the script. And it was, to this day, it's the reaction, the feeling I had of that screenplay is I've never, you know, unfortunately, it's like a drug. Although I've never been a heroin addict, it felt like, oh my God, I've read the best screenplay I'm ever going to read. And there's never going to be another one like this. And it was so beautiful, even though, you know, as with everything, we worked on it, but it was Sherman was a masterful writer, you know, a wonderful poet, short story writer, novelist, incredibly talented, and wrote this beautiful script. And I went to my partner in Seattle because I had been teaching him about the film business. We were just starting this new company. We were going to do what everybody does, develop stuff, and then get other people to finance it in LA and otherwise. And I read the script, and I went to my partner, and I said, I think we found it. I wanted to have a signature movie for my company in Seattle. I didn't want to make any old movie. I wanted to make a movie that was about the Northwest, about the culture, and about that part of the world. And this was everything for that. And he said, "Oh, great. Okay, what do you want to do? Where do you want to go? You know, okay, we can option it and do that and pay Sherman a little bit of money to do a rewrite. Where do you want to go to get it funded?" I said, and I pointed at him. I said, "Right here," because he was, wealthy. And I said, "What do you think? We have to make this movie." I said, "I'm sorry."
I'm laughing.
And we did. We financed it. We made it ourselves and sold it to Miramax when we were done. Did very well with it. It won a couple Spirit Awards and a bunch of other stuff. And, the acting was incredible and the music was incredible. And, we did the whole thing for about $1.9 million. Our way.
Right.
Our way. No interference, no bonding company, no anything. Just leave us the F alone. Leave us alone and let us make this movie, and we will turn in a beautiful movie that also has some commercial sense to it. And, we did. Sherman was a unique talent, a unique talent.
Okay, so we don't have a lot of time left, but I want to, this is an opportunity for all the filmmakers following us. What advice, from your, you saw it all, I guess. You've seen it all. What advice, one great advice for the young producer filmmakers that?
It's a commercial business, so you have to be cognizant of your audience. I don't think you can really exist if you're making movies for two people, right? Or your dog or something. But I mean, some people feel, well, I don't care. I'm just going to make this movie, and I don't care. That doesn't mean you have to pander. That doesn't mean you have to make a movie with Sid Field's writing book next to you and do it exactly the way he says. It means you have to find what's in your heart and get that out on the page and then on screen or on TV. You have to expose parts of yourself to be able to make great work and not just by the numbers work. We all struggle with sometimes having to make a living and make certain things by the numbers, whether we've been offered jobs that are just jobs or most movies that are just rote where the camera turns on and people run back and forth or sideways, which is, unfortunately a lot of stuff. But to make something masterful and to think of yourself as, you have to dig and dig and dig and dig and dig, and you cannot let up. So I think people really, it's worth it. To me, it's worth it. We've all had struggles. The last few years haven't even been that easy because, I'm getting older and there's ageism in Hollywood. And I've looked elsewhere. I've been working overseas, China, Australia, the Philippines, but still doing stories that I really love. And the things I'm doing now are bigger commercial things. But the things that I've really worked on, I've written, I'm also producing. So you have to fight. You have to fight for what you believe, but you also have to understand you're in an industry that is a commercial industry. If you can fund it yourself at $30 million, go ahead. But right. Nobody can. Most people can't. So, but you really have to, as long as you're tapped into yourself, you've got to keep going. You got to keep going and just find the people who believe in you. And I think you will.
So we talked about a lot of stuff, and we covered a lot of films and trends and legacies in Hollywood and in the filmmaking. Just a quick shout out, Scott was the executive producer of a film called A Case of Blue that will world premiere at Lighthouse today at 8:30 at the Long Beach Island Foundation, where we are now. It's basically sold out, by the way.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So,
well, Dana did a nice job. He did a nice job, and he, I support NYU filmmakers, and he came to me, and I try every once in a while, every 18 months or 2 years, to executive produce, kind of mentor somebody, and that was the movie I picked me about a year and a half ago, and he did a really lovely job with it.
Yeah. So this is a local commercial.
Yeah, shot in New Jersey, in Ridgewood. Yeah. Around Ridgewood.
Okay, so Scott, I feel so blessed that you're here and you're accepting our award. And yeah, we have.
You're doing great when everything opens up.
Just make sure you spell it right, please. You don't want to misspell my name.
I know.
Oh, thank you.
So,
Appreciate it.
yeah, this is our humble symbolic award.
Thank you, guys. I do appreciate it very much.
And you're a guest, next year,
Yeah, I would
without
love
a
to.
mask,
I would love
you'll
to.
come and you'll have fun with us. And as Jerry said, we know how to have fun.
Yeah, maybe we'll all see each other. And Jerry, say hi to Nina too.
I will. I certainly will. Congratulations and thanks for doing
Thank you,
this.
Jerry. Thanks for being a part of this too.
Okay.
You bet. Okay. Goodbye for now. Come, whoever is lucky to get a ticket for a case of blue, maybe they'll see you there, or
Yeah, I might stay for
Okay.
at least for a little bit and see.
great. Okay, cool. So thanks so much. We'll see you at 5 o'clock for our next Q&A with Rod Laurie, the director of The Outpost. Okay, and Jake Simansky from John Bronco.